So it seems like everyone and their mother rewatched Teen Wolf this summer, and I am certainly no different. However, during my rewatch, a certain question came to the forefront of my mind. Why am I finding it so difficult to like Allison Argent? Well, it wasn't until I started looking around for a summary of season 1 did I actually find my answer. Alone in the woods at night, Scott McCall is bitten by the Alpha and turns into a werewolf. He's struggling to balance being a werewolf with his normal life and his new love interest, Allison Argent. A series of animal attack murders lead to the search for the alpha werewolf and... Wait. Go back. He struggles to balance being a werewolf with his normal life and love interest, Allison Argent. For a world that was purposefully written to have no racism and misogyny in it, there sure was a lot of subtle racism and misogyny. The treatment of Arden Cho and Kira, the abuse Lydia suffers through in the first 2 seasons, and the nonchalantness of Derek being groomed. Misogyny is littered all over the place, and nowhere is it more prevalent than in Allison Argent. You know, Lydia's treatment might be worse, but she's not the topic of the video, so... Allison Argent suffers from the same thing that the My Hero Academia female characters suffer from. Faux depth. Faux depth is a term that I don't actually think exists. Hang on a second, let me Google it. Oh, it's a camera technique. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. But for me, faux depth is when a character seems to have development, but when you look a little bit closer, you see they're actually really stagnant, and they're just being pulled along by the plot. But what is Teen Wolf? Teen Wolf is an MTV teen drama series that ran for 6 seasons between 2011 and 2017. It was also a supernatural reimagining of the 1985 film Teen Wolf, which starred Michael J. Fox. Teen Wolf is pretty well known for its humour and supernatural themes, with a few breakout stars being Dylan O'Brien, Tyler Hoechlin, and Arden Cho. Or, if you're well versed in the American teen drama casts, Shelley Henning, J.R. Bourne, and Daniel Sharman. Or, if you want to get super into the cast lore, Froy Gutierrez, who everyone seemed to fancast as Dream back in 2021. Essentially, this cast is pretty popular. One of the main reasons for the success of Teen Wolf was due to 2 things that I have previously mentioned. Its witty sense of humour and its bible of supernatural creatures. See, a lot of other supernatural teen dramas weren't really doing it like Teen Wolf. Each season had a mystery element as we followed our main character Scott McCall as he tried to figure out what the new supernatural creature was and who was behind it. Teen Wolf drew on a lot of supernatural folklore from all the way around the world. We're talking banshees from Irish folklore, druids from Celtic folklore, were-jaguars from Mexican and Central American folklore, kitsunes from Japanese folklore, and obviously werewolves from folklore in just about every European country that Wikipedia could offer me. And these are literally only a few of the supernaturals that Teen Wolf brings up. They present them with a modern-day twist, which makes their inclusion in the story feel both natural and interesting. One of these remastered folklore stories is La Bête du Gévaudan. After watching Teen Wolf, La Bête became one of my favourite bits of werewolf folklore. So much so, when it got included in the case study of Vanitas, I literally screamed and had to take a lap around my room, because I was so excited. But the story of La Bête, like I said, was remastered to fit the Teen Wolf lore, and in my opinion, it got remastered in one of the best ways possible. In werewolf folklore, it's believed that they can be killed by a silver bullet. Well, in the Teen Wolf world, this folklore got twisted slightly. The silver bullet that is being referred to isn't actually a bullet and more like a person. In fact, it's more like a whole family. After all, Argent means silver in French. Now, the Argent family's origin is pretty fucking cool. Essentially, the first ever werewolf, La Bête, was killed by a woman who held the name Argent, and as the time went on, the Argent family literally became a family of werewolf hunters. Because the first Argent was a woman, the Argent family followed a matriarchal ruling. The women became leaders and the men became soldiers. But this is where the problems start to lie. The motto really isn't put into practice. Don't get me wrong, we certainly get told that women are the rulers of the family, but we never actually get shown it. The closest we get is Kate Argent bringing the group of hunters to Derek Hale's charred house, which she burned down, by the way, and then beat the fuck out of him. But this doesn't show us anything about the Argent's matriarchy. It's implied these people follow Kate and Chris because they are Argents. And it's shown throughout season 1 that Kate and Chris stand on the same footing when making decisions. And this dissonance between what we're being told and what we're being shown leads into my problems with Allison. But to make this video as clear and concise as possible, Let me take it season by season. Allison Argent, Season 1. I do want to start this analysis with a little bit of a PSA. This is my first time making a video about deeply analysing characters, so my words might not properly reflect what I'm trying to say. Hopefully this isn't the case. I did get someone to have a look at this and they said it was fine, but I wanted to say this now before I go on the defensive in the comments. When we first get introduced to Allison, she's a new student at Beacon Hills High School and has caught the attention of Scott McCall. He gives her a pen and now she's kind of interested in him. It's very Mean Girls.
It's October 3rd.
But I think it works in like a meet cute kind of way. It also works well to tie Allison to Scott's normal side, which she wrestles with throughout the entire season. This is somewhat the beginning of Allison's character arc for this season. She's very much an everyman for us viewers, reacting similarly to how we would react in certain situations. Freaking out when being hunted by a monster in high school in the dead of night, freaking out when you find werewolves exist and your entire family hunt them down, and freaking out when you find out your boyfriend is a monstrous dog boy. She was honestly going through it this season. I firmly believe that Allison's arc this season was about finding agency in her own life. We find out that she moves around a lot, so doesn't make a lot of friends, let alone partners, so she's pretty isolated. As this season progresses, we start to see her put down her roots in Beacon Hills. She becomes best friends with Lydia, she starts dating Scott, and she makes friends with a lot of beloved side characters. I'm looking at you, Danny! However, her life gets thrown a curveball when she finds herself trapped in the school with Scott, Styles, Jackson, and Lydia. This is a highly stressful period of time for her, and I'm surprised none of them are shown to have PTSD afterwards, but I guess that lack of episodes will do that to you. However, her decision to break up with Scott and her motivations afterwards I think are incredibly valid. After this, she admits to Kate that she wants to feel powerful, and given the situation and what she finds out like 5 minutes later, I think is an incredible way to start a real character arc. She wants to become stronger, not to try and protect others, but to try and have the power to protect herself from whatever might be thrown at her. And as a female-built person living in 2025, that is really relatable. Considering this season was written in 2011, I think this character arc was way ahead of its time. However, we don't get to see this arc. And I'll talk more about it when we get to season 2 when it does start to take shape. But let's just say I'm really disappointed, and this is kind of where my accusations of misogyny come from. But before I go off on a tangent, let's finish season 1. Eventually, Allison's life gets twisted on its head when she finds out that Scott is a werewolf, and the same kind of thing that Kate has been telling her is incredibly dangerous. However, the tail end of her character arc is brought down by the lack of episodes in this season. It would have been nice to see her sit with the revelation that Scott is a werewolf, and tie it back to a lot of the things that were weird about him, or at least in a way that we as the viewers could see her tying it together. Plus, her decision to then go after them feels a bit strange, even when it's revealed that she was told it was just Derek she thought she was going after. Because up to this point, she doesn't really have an issue with Derek, other than Scott lying to her about him potentially being a serial killer, but I'm pretty sure Kate brings that up anyway, so yeah, I don't know where this point was going. Essentially, Allison has a weird thing with Derek, and it's very forced. However, her dad shows up and helps Scott, and it makes sense for her to join him, since this is the first time she's really seen Scott and Argent be on the same side. Her reaction to Kate's death is unfortunately never really seen, and its impact on her isn't really explored outside of her being outcasted from school, but that's an issue I have with both season 2 and season 3. While her character arc was decent, I found it strange upon my rewatch that it was so centered around men. And I know that can be a bit of a buzzword, but I really don't know any other way to describe it. But since we're on the topic of buzzwords, I couldn't really prove my suspicions of misogyny since I really liked her arc in season 1, so I came up with a foolproof idea. I wanted to see how she interacted with her fellow female characters. So I went back and watched the scenes on 2+ and skipped through them, and I watched all of the scenes that she had with Lydia, since this was the person she was closest with in all 3 seasons. And I made a game of, will they pass the Bechdel test? This will be a bit I bring up in every season, so look forward to that. So, out of the 7 scenes that Lydia and Allison had in season 1, which is shockingly low considering they are best friends, or self-described best friends, the number of scenes where they did not talk about men was, drumroll please, 3! Which is actually really generous considering 2 of those 3 scenes are interrupted by men after like 3 lines. Those men being Jackson and Argent respectively, and then they leave the scene and then they talk about men. It's clear that in season 1, Allison's sole purpose is to function as character development for Scott, and as a thing for him to desire for. The crazy thing is, there's multiple scenes where we explore Allison's character, but all of those scenes are weirdly done with Jackson and not Lydia. I mean, it's not weird because he's low-key trying to get with her until Scott puts his foot down, but why is it Allison's only interactions are with people who find her attractive or talking about men? This kind of writing strips Allison back from any kind of development or likability that she could have had, and honestly it feels like toe-dipping into the pool of misogyny. It kind of feels like the writers can't think of Allison being an interesting character because she's a teenage girl. But don't worry, this is one of the better seasons for Allison's character arc. Allison Argent, Season 2. Allison's development in this season feels like a coin toss. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's god-awful. Like last season, we're going to work in timeline order. Season 2 picks up right after Season 1, and Scott and Allison are forced into a secret relationship by her dad. Fuck you, Chris Argent. And while the secret relationship aspect is interesting, I was more interested in Allison's reaction to Kate's death. After all, they were shown to be really close. From what was shown, Allison has little to no reaction to Kate's death. Crystal Reed is doing a lot of the heavy lifting with the micro expressions that Allison gives off whenever Kate or the hailfire is mentioned. But when it comes to actual narrative beats or just the scenes we're shown, Allison kind of acts like she never cared. We never see her grief or the trauma of seeing Kate violently murdered in front of her. Hell, this could have been a great moment to set up her growing fear and turned anger of werewolves, which later could have set off her rampage against Derek and his betas. As well as this, why didn't we get to explore Allison's complicated feelings on her aunt, someone she loved very dearly, being exposed as a mass murderer and arguably a psychopath? These small ideas, which would have only taken 1 or 2 conversations with Scott, would have made her character arc this season so much more concise and put together. Allison joining Scott and Styles and looking for Lydia was a nice touch. It shows she cares more than just on the surface level that we might have believed, considering they only had 7 scenes last season. And her willingness to throw her relationship with Scott up in the air for Lydia was really sweet. Another thing I liked about her arc this season was its relation and the impact on the Argent family as a whole. Allison starts training to become an actual full-fledged hunter with the help of her dad, which the iconic declaration,
"Our sons are trained to be soldiers, our daughters to be leaders,"
comes in. This line, I have some issues with this line, but I'll come back to it when it links to the rest of my rant. Watching Allison grow to become a semi-confident hunter was incredible to watch. We saw her develop her skills, then her knowledge, and then her confidence in her decisions, and it felt natural and deserved. Arguably, I'd say this is one of the best girl boss training arcs I've seen for a while. Her arc doesn't take away from any other characters, nor does it try to mock anyone in the process. It's unique to her own experiences, which helps elevate the story with more depth and lore exploration. AKA, I like this aspect and just wish they'd shown more of it. I will say though, we don't actually get to see her be badass to any strong-ish characters. The most we really see is her beating Erica twice and then Boyd once. What did I say earlier about subtle misogyny and racism in this show? This is a dig at the writers for making those 2 weak, by the way. Erica and Boyd were totally justified in all of their actions this season, even if I don't agree with them. When it comes to the impact on the Argent family as a whole, watching Allison learn to re-trust her father after everything that happened with Scott was a beautiful setup for the relationship they have in Season 3. Especially the way that Argent develops because of her actions and her love for characters. Now, the death of her mother is truly tragic. We get such an emotional moment on the build-up of Allison not knowing anything is wrong and her mother wanting to say goodbye. Then a brutal send-off with Chris, and it's all so emotional, even more so when Allison actually gets to the hospital and sees her mother dead. But after that, it seems like Allison's grief gets put on the back burner for a little bit. While she's obviously grieving and being in the anger stage of it, we don't really get to see the consequences of it. Obviously, she's going after Derek and his pack, but up until this point, they've been antagonists, so if anything, she is wholly justified. But the show kind of makes it seem like she's not. Her anger is never pushed any further than a few smirks and a obvious irrational decision-making, and I think that's a real problem. We're told that Allison is going off the rails and being manipulated by Gerard and making decisions based solely on revenge, but we're not really seeing it. Her anger is tame. Her reasonings are as fragile as the manipulation that Gerard has lathered on. In summary, her revenge arc doesn't work, and it really lets down Allison's character. It feels like the writers weren't convinced that Allison's emotions were valid enough, or they didn't want to commit to her being an antagonist for a short while because they weren't sure they were going to get the audience back on her side. Either way, these are both failures of the writing and the development team. It's like Jeff Davis couldn't imagine a world where Allison could go up against these werewolves without needing to be saved, despite the fact that we're shown via Chris Argent's backstory that hunters are usually left to their own devices. Now this could be because she hasn't graduated from being a hunter yet, but from the experiences she has with Peter Hale and then Derek and his pack, Allison has plenty of experience about going up against werewolves. So why isn't she given that chance? And there is a very simple answer to this. Because she will never be anything more than a love interest that needs to be saved. Now, this issue persists into Season 3, which is where my faux depth argument comes from, but at the end of Season 2, Allison is right back to where she started at the beginning of the season, which might not have been a bad thing if it was intentional, but I kinda don't believe that it was. A little quick intermission before we go into the character assassination of Allison Argent in Season 3. We need to do our Season 2 Bechdel test between Allison and Lydia. Allison and Lydia don't have a lot of reasons to be interacting this season, so it'll be fun to see how many of those times pass the Bechdel test. Out of the 4 scenes Lydia and Allison have in Season 2, the number of scenes of which they talk about men was 2! And I honestly can't believe it got worse after Season 1, but it did. I suppose the ratio being 50-50 isn't bad, but like when you compare it to the sample size of only having 4 scenes and 2 of them are about men, it's bad. Allison Argent in Season 3. This one is so sad because Allison had so much potential, and all I could think about while watching Season 3 was that if this is what they decided to do with her character, I'm glad she died. Crystal Reed and Allison deserved better, and I will absolutely get into why. Picking up a couple months after Season 2, Allison is back from France, and it's clear she has developed her hunting skills a lot just from the way she talks to Lydia. Any traces of the anger about her mother is gone, but Allison isn't the previous Allison that we knew. Immediately, we see problems with the appearance of Derek. For the first time in 2 seasons, Derek is no longer an antagonist, and because of this, he now becomes everyone's baby girl. This show makes an extreme effort to paint Allison in the wrong last season, while Allison is actively defending herself by claiming that she was grieving her mother. However, it makes no mention to the fact that she was openly manipulated by Gerard. And I like to call this a retcon. A very significant one at that, by the way. While you might not like what Allison was doing last season, you cannot deny the fact that her grief was manipulated by Gerard, and the writers actively pretending like it didn't happen is one of the reasons many people don't actually like Allison. Plainly, she was a victim. But we all know how Jeff Davis likes to treat his victims in this show. Following on from this point, a significant amount of the first couple of episodes follow Allison trying to prove something is happening. I don't know why Scott doesn't believe her, especially because if this came from Argent, he would believe him. But also because Allison has this weird desire to prove herself to Derek. Like, you shouldn't give a shit about this guy. As far as you know, he killed your mother. You can be civil with him, but don't fish for his approval. This pattern of behavior follows her throughout the season, constantly trying to prove herself where she doesn't need to, and trying to prove herself to the wrong people. This confusing and inconsistent writing makes Allison seem out of place and useless for most of this season, and it's really disappointing. Allison could have been using her hunting skills like she does when she traps Cora and Boyd in the school, but we never see this again. She's just there. But the real insult to Allison's character is whatever the hell happens with Isaac. Now, this is something that bugs me about both Allison and Isaac's character arcs this season. But this video is about Allison, and we all know that Isaac was never going to be treated right because he's a victim. However, Allison is once again reduced to being a love interest in the worst possible way. Allison and Isaac start to team up after they get trapped in the closet together, and then, with the help of Scott, work to get one of the Alpha twins suspended. And this is when we get our first glimpse at something going on between Allison and Isaac. The next time we get any idea that there might be something going on is after the Motel California episode, which is a banging episode, by the way, when they meet up again to figure out if Chris Argent is sacrificing people. Argent did have a map with all the possible places that someone could be sacrificed, but I don't know why Allison found this suspicious. Argent had no reason to be sacrificing people, and they just spent like 3 months together in France. Like, girl, you need to trust your father. However, Allison and Isaac grow particularly close over the next few episodes. However, there is little to no substance between the two. It genuinely feels like the writers had no idea what to do with these two characters and thought, we need more shipping wars. It always seems to circle back to Allison constantly being labelled as a love interest or being a reason for male characters to develop. I genuinely think that Allison and Isaac would have worked really well as a Holmes-Watson detective duo as they try and figure out, 1, where Erica and Boyd are, and 2, who is killing all these people. Having them split off with Argent and then having Scott do his own thing could have made the two groups come together in The Girl Who Knew Too Much and realize together that Lydia is gone. It would have raised the stakes and given both Allison and Isaac a learning experience. Isaac finally learning how genuinely dangerous being a supernatural creature is via the Argents teaching him how they hunt, and Allison learning how she wants to live as a hunter. Just a small change to the plot has already given these two so much more depth than they ever got being romantically involved with each other. And this is just 3A. 3B is easily one of the best seasons of television I've seen, and it's up there with season 4 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But the only real flaw I have with this season is the treatment of Allison and Isaac. They basically get into a relationship this season. They have a couple of funny scenes before having awkward romantic moments. However, we did get the iconic line of, "Another werewolf?" So I'm inclined to forgive most of them. Now, I don't believe Allison and Isaac's chemistry is forced in any way. In fact, Crystal Reed and Daniel Sharman have a lot of chemistry together. I don't know if this is correct, but I think they dated while they were on set or something. I don't know. But them being romantically involved with each other, I'm not sold on the fact they're in love with each other. I'm not even sold on the fact that they're sexually attracted to each other. They just feel awkward in the scenes that they're in. And I genuinely think that their chemistry would have worked better as an enemies to friends rather than an enemies to, like, lovers for 2 episodes before Allison dies, you know? For me, the best moment of Allison's character is actually when she dies. I really like this scene. Not because I was happy when she died. I wasn't. But because her death means something. In a lot of shows that I watch, I find that death doesn't mean too much, and characters aren't allowed to grieve those deaths. But Allison's death had such an impact on the wider plot. First of all, Allison actually figures out that the Silver can kill the Oni. Despite the fact that she can't tell anyone, it gives the audience a bit of hope before it all comes crashing down when she does get stabbed. A masterful bit of writing, by the way. I will give them that. It's also nice that Isaac also figures it out because they've spent so much time together this season, and it would have felt weird if he didn't. This is also why I support them as besties and not lovers. Secondly, the moment with Scott when she's in his arms is the most heart-wrenchingly beautiful moment. It feels like we're having a glimpse at season 1 Allison mixed with the Allison who genuinely cares for helping her friends against crazy evil creatures. The moment that she admits she's still in love with him is bittersweet, but it was also a really nice closure moment for Scott. Thirdly, Allison is constantly impacting the plot after she dies. Isaac moves away. Argent is set on following through on her new motto and helping Scott, and the rest of our main cast are never quite the same. She's mentioned in season 4 with the Deadpool. She's mentioned again in season 5, and then obviously in season 6 when Gerard comes back. Allison Argent is so ingrained into this show. It just sucks that it only happened after she died. Her death for me is one of her greatest moments, and it sucks that it literally happened in her last scene. The flashback in Labette doesn't count. That's not Allison, that's Crystal Reed trying to do a French accent, which was really funny. But Allison Argent does leave a significant impact on this show. But you can tell how badly a character is treated when her death scene is one of the best scenes in the show. I believe in this scene, she has depth. She's multi-dimensional. She feels real. But why is it happening in her final moments? Why couldn't we get these kind of scenes earlier in the show? It's like this kind of unintentional disrespect, which makes me call misogyny, because it feels like a bias against her. Isaac's scenes with his dad and the aftermath of them all feel better written than the entirety of Allison's character, and that depth gets dropped halfway through season 2. Peter Hale has more depth than Allison, and he was literally the villain of season 1. His depth started when we were presented with the idea that he was in his right mind in killing Laura in season 1. And then in season 3, he's getting even more depth as we're shown he's not as calculated as we might think, but he's definitely self-absorbed. My point is, why are these minor characters, who are men, having more time put into their characters than Allison Argent, who is literally one of the main characters? The only explanation I can come up with is that they don't believe she's worth the time or effort to write with depth, which is defined by the word contempt, and contempt shows up in the definition of misogyny. Allison Argent is a character who could have easily grown out of the archetype of love interest, but she just simply wasn't allowed to. She deserves better. Okay, time for our final Bechdel test. Out of the 11 scenes that Lydia and Allison had in season 3, the number of scenes where they didn't talk about men was 5. To break it down a little further, in season 3A, Lydia and Allison had a one-on-one conversation about 8 times, and only passed the Bechdel test 3 times. 4 of those conversations were in episode 1. I also considered the entirety of the Motel California episode as a pass, because it does wonders for both of their character developments, as well as selling their bond to the audience. In season 3, they interact a total of 3 times without anyone else present, and pass 2 of those. Again, these 2 happen in the first episode. After this, they are paired up with their respective love interests, and basically never interact again. In summary of the Bechdel test bit, out of the 43 episodes that Allison and Lydia have been in together, they had a total of 22 scenes together, and only 10 of them were not about men. For context, 43 episodes of 50 minutes equates to 2,150 minutes. They had about 44 minutes of screen time where it was just the 2 of them, and because their scenes never lasted longer than around 2 minutes, it equates to about 20 minutes of screen time where they're not talking about men. I feel so bad for both of those characters. In conclusion, I like Allison. I don't love her, but I like her. And I like her with Scott. In fact, I only really like her when she's with Scott, and that's the problem. When an entire character revolves around another character, it means that they can never be properly developed. To try and get my point across more effectively, I'm going to bring back my My Hero Academia comparison again. For those who don't know what the hell My Hero is, My Hero Academia, or Boku no Hero Academia, is a super-powered manga heavily inspired by the Western superhero comic book genre. The story follows Izuku Deku Midoriya as he navigates his path to becoming the world's greatest hero. Ochako Uraraka is the female side character originally designed to be the love interest, like Allison. Now, I have the same relationship with Uraraka as I do with Allison. I like her, but I don't love her. Uraraka has the problem where most of her character development revolves around Deku. They both have a very high school crush on each other, and Uraraka is always inspired by Deku and wanting to become a better hero. There is only 3 instances of Uraraka's character development not being tied to Deku throughout 8 seasons of the show. First is her fight with Bakugo. She almost beats him, gains the guy's respect before eventually yielding because she's too exhausted. This is an incredible moment for Uraraka and female characters alike, because she is actively breaking the mold of love interest by standing on her own 2 feet and showing that she is not weak and needing saving. However, the next time we get development from Uraraka is 4 seasons later in season 6. The second instance of character development is after the climax of the arc. War has ended and the heroes have lost, and Uraraka is trying to save as many civilians as possible. However, she witnesses a hero give up, because it's too much for him. This grows her empathy and sets her new goal on becoming a hero that other heroes can rely on. Her final instance of character development, without the influence of Deku, is regarding Himiko Toga. Now, technically, these 2 both have a crush on Deku, so he is technically involved, but it's not like Deku himself is the driving force for Uraraka to develop. It's her desire to help someone she now realizes is a victim of the world around her. She wants Toga to smile, to be able to live a normal life, and she fights almost to the death to make that happen. The only reason Uraraka doesn't die in this fight is because she's changed Toga's heart, and Toga dies for her to live. Which is fucked up, by the way, but you guys don't care, so I will move on. Now, the reason I bring up Uraraka is because she managed to break out of the faux depth in order to gain real depth. Allison Argent will never be able to do this, because in the eyes of her writers, she's nothing more than Scott's love interest. Now, I'm not going to touch on the movie. I haven't seen it, and frankly, I don't think I want to. None of my favourite characters show up, and apparently Derek dies. So I'm good. But when I found out Allison was going to be in this movie, I was actually kind of upset. Well, like I said earlier, Allison's death was a great moment. While she might not have had any character moments herself, she did manage to leave a significant mark on the rest of the cast, and I appreciate that. However, bringing her back would only tarnish that, and tarnish the fact that Scott managed to move on. And once again, it is brought back to a man! Allison coming back, and Scott and Allison being together in this movie is a fucking joke, and the best example of misogyny. It's proof that Jeff Davis only cares about Allison when she's in relation to Scott. He doesn't care about the trauma she might have suffered coming back from the dead. He doesn't care about the fact that she might be mentally 18 because that's when she died. He only cares about getting his ship together, and that is reductive of her character, and that is misogynistic. I really recommend going back and rewatching this show now with the lens of Allison Argent isn't treated right. Because when I did do that, I was like, oh yeah. And I love this show, don't get me wrong. I can look past that, but I shouldn't have to look past that, you know? So, yeah.